Welcome to the Dr. Hockey Podcast. This is Dr. Jay Calvert, and I am joined today by Dr. Jason Berkeley and Mr. Kevin Connolly. Gentlemen, how are you guys doing?
Jason Firefox Berkeley, back in action.
Back at it again with the Firefox, aren't we?
That's a great nickname. Listen, there's far worse nicknames you could have.
And they've been given to me. Trust me.
I like it.
Firefox is a cool nickname.
Yeah.
Firefox, what are we going to talk to Doc Emrick about today? Because he's our guest.
Started now. This is like it's like the Baba Booey.
I would take that nickname and run with it. That's a great.
Totally,
nickname.
it's a great one. You don't want to be Firefox? I don't even have a nickname like Firefox.
Well, the guy's name was Mitchell Gant. I mean, that was the pilot's name. I would prefer to,
But you are Firefox.
You are He's Mitchell Gant. You are Firefox.
Totally.
All right, I'm Firefox.
Today on the podcast, we are going to interview Mike Doc Emrick, Hall of Fame hockey announcer, amazing guy. We've had him on before. We love talking to him about Rivalry, which he does on NBC every Wednesday. We love talking to him about what's going on in the NHL. So, Kevin, are you going to talk to him about the Islanders?
I will figure out a way to twist it and turn it into an Islander conversation.
There should be an Islander. First of all, the Islanders are killing it.
Right.
Not if I can turn it into a Red Wings conversation first.
Yeah, it will be a battle. It will be a battle.
I think in that there's not much of a battle there.
Yeah, I mean, for the first time in 25 years, the Islanders are way better than the Red Wings. So let me have my moment, please.
Well, let's get right
to it.
You had
4 in a row.
That's true.
39 years ago. So it's
not that long ago. All right.
Let's get the authority on this discussion then.
Emrick.
Let's bring on Doc Emrick. So tell us, Doc, this season started off with a lot of scoring. Tell us what your impressions are. We've got a lot of questions from our fans. Ask Doc about all the scoring, specifically.
Yeah.
One gal from.
We started yet?
Yeah. No, we're gonna roll right now. We can start it with this.
Oh, okay. Now. So we're underway.
Yeah. Well, I'll ask you a question right out of the gates from one of our fellow podcasters, Skating in Stilettos, who is a New Jersey Devils fan and aficionado. She sent in a question about the number of goals. There were a bunch of teams with 7 goals early in the season, and now, it seems like nobody's hitting 7 goals and it's decreasing. But the number of goals this season is just crazy to her, and we agree. Do you see something? Is it the forwards? Is it the goaltending? Why are the scores up?
Yeah, it's a little bit of each, and I think a lot of it has to do with the defense too. I mean, you have a team like the Rangers who haven't had a wonderful year, but I was just looking up for last night. 31% of the points that they've gotten, scoring points, have come from the defense. I think we're seeing more of that too. More offensive schemes that are bringing defense into the play. In our Wednesday night games, we've noticed. What was it, last Wednesday? 2 weeks ago Wednesday, we were in Boston, and it was on. No, I'm sorry, I beg your pardon. It wasn't a Wednesday. It was a Saturday night game with St. Louis, and at one point, 2 of the Blues defensemen were behind the goal line. They had pulled all the way in that far. And you know what it was like in the old days. The old days are now defined as 3 years ago, when one defenseman might get caught back behind the goal line on the attack, but you didn't have 2 guys in on an offensive floor. You didn't have 2 defensemen back behind the net trying to set up an offensive play, because somebody had to cover for you, and the surest way to get benched, or at least to be chewed out, was to have 2 defensemen. But that's the way it is now. And we had a record number of goals scored last year. I realize that we're having more games played than we used to when we had 30 teams as opposed to 31. But we had a record number of goals scored, and we may have that same number this year. I mean, Nashville's got, 60 already. I know there's a danger in a podcast in giving numbers because they become obsolete almost by the time anyone listens to this. But goals are fun.
You bet.
And some of us like seeing a 1-0 game once in a while, but goals are fun. I mean, even in the first 3 weeks, Pittsburgh had 3 7-goal games.
Unbelievable.
And yeah, it's fun to see goals scored. And the only people that hate are the goaltenders, and so I'll apologize in advance for Brian Boucher. But goals are fun, and so more power to them. And I think the power plays are much better too. You used to have a wonderful power play if you were around 22, 23%. The Bruins are number 1 in categories in the league right now, and they're around 30.
Yeah, it also seems that most of these goals being scored are against my Red Wings. This is
Well, it's a rough stretch right now, and it hasn't been rougher in a long time on Detroit than it is right now.
Yeah.
And it's just sad. But tomorrow night we're going to see two really young teams. Detroit's youth is balanced by a bunch of guys in their 30s, so they don't have many in the late 20s categories. It's either you're under 25 or you're over 30 on the Red Wings team, whereas the Rangers are a bunch of guys. They have 7 guys that are 21 or under that have played the last 3 games.
Wow.
They're the youngest team in the league, and so we're going to have youth against kind of youth in our game tomorrow night. And the other thing too is that if you love history, on the West Coast it'll be in prime time. On the East Coast it'll be around 11 o'clock Eastern. We're going to show the movie The Russian Five. And that documents, for Red Wing fans or for fans of history of hockey, a wonderful time in Detroit Red Wings history when they had 5 Russian players coming together and playing all at once, a part of a juggernaut team in Detroit that won championships. And so that. But the second part of the doubleheader tomorrow night's a movie.
Well, that's amazing because we know that movie quite well. We were at the Beverly Hills premiere. In fact, Jason and I did the Q&A with Jenny Fedorovich and Josh Reel, and we think the movie's incredible. Just it's not just a hockey movie. I mean, we were talking about it last week too, and in fact, Josh is coming in on the 19th to join us here in the studio, and we're big fans. We think it should get an Oscar.
There is a young man named Steve Bannatyne who's involved with the movie too, and I know his father quite well because when I was in the International League as a rookie broadcaster, he was playing in the league, and in 1980-81, after I had left the league, his defense partner in the IHL was a rookie named Claude Julien. And they played together as defense partners for 1 year before Claude found brighter lights in the Central and Western League, and then eventually in the NHL. But there are a lot of hockey connections there. But isn't it heartening that Sergei Fedorov now looks ugly? Gee, the guy is he? I mean, is he ever going to be anything other than a movie idol?
I mean, he's amazing.
I mean. Maybe when he's 75, he will start to maybe look like an older person. But even at this time in his life, he still looks like he could star in a Hollywood movie, and I guess that's just what he's done.
Well, he'll look better when he gets his jersey hanging from the Little Caesars Arena, because I think he deserves it.
Yeah, that'll happen too.
Yeah.
It always happens to great Red Wings, and he was certainly one of those. The best, every once in a while, because I spent 21 years in New Jersey and Marty Brodeur was there for most of them, I've been asked, what was the best save you ever saw Marty Brodeur make? And it was in Detroit at Joe Louis against Sergei Fedorov. He was on a power play, and he wound up at the blue line and just wheeled. It was out of a chaotic skirmish, and it came back to him. He just wheeled and drilled one that was probably 3 feet high. And Marty moved from his right to his left and dove and got his paddle on it. Otherwise, it was going into the net. And I thought, considering the velocity of the shot and who shot it, to even come back and get a piece of that was remarkable. But to get the paddle of his stick on it, so that struck me as the best I ever saw.
We're gonna have to look that
Marty
one up.
Brodeur
Yes,
make.
we need to look at that one up.
That's a YouTuber.
It was a routine middle of the year game. It was not anything special. It wasn't in the playoffs at all in 95. But Fedorov was remarkable, and I got to know Slava Fetisov when he was in New Jersey, and then eventually went on to Detroit and wound up getting the championships that he certainly deserved. But I can't imagine what he went through. I was only told what he went through by others, because he didn't talk about it. He never wanted sympathy for himself whenever we would talk about those first years as a New Jersey Devil and the harassment that he went through when he came to the NHL, because he had gone through enough when he left, because they would get in his face and said, your parents will go to Siberia. And one time I was told by a third party, not by not by Fetisov himself, that there was a silence behind him and he heard a gun cock.
Wow.
That was just part of the third party story, not his own, about the kind of mental anguish that he went through when they knew that he wanted to leave. But eventually he did. And then, of course, it was no smooth sailing when he got here. But he earned his reward not only with the championships in Detroit, but also the esteem that he was held in by the time that people realized how great a player that he had been worldwide, and that they had gotten a chance to see him play, though it was near the end of his days here in North America.
Well, we, in fact, wanted to let you know, Mr. Kevin Connolly joins us right now, and he wanted to say hello to you.
How are you, Mr. Emrick?
Kevin, I'm fine.
Well, I walked in a little bit late.
We aren't going to have any... Yeah, that's okay. I know about traffic out there. Are all of you safe from the fires?
You know, it's dicey out here. I mean, you know, one gust of wind.
Not
it's one
not
ember.
really.
So I guess the short answer is no. But yeah, no, it's pretty hectic out here. Those Santa Anas kick up. But I thought, were you guys talking about the Islanders winning 9 in a row when I walked in? I thought I heard something
We
about
were going to get to that.
that didn't come up?
Yeah, by the time a lot of people watch this, it will probably be 10.
Yeah, they're up 2-1, but we don't want to jinx anybody.
I had that down as one of my sure bets for the year, didn't you?
Well, yeah, of course, I always do, but you know how it goes, right? I mean,
I had Arizona winning 8 out of 10 right now. Did you?
I did not. Look, it's a long year. You got to stay healthy.
Of course.
Well, listen, the Islanders.
Yeah, that's the one thing that is so wonderful about this year is that none of us can, anybody that pretends that they're an expert on this, you can be until the first puck's dropped on October the 2nd, and then you don't know a thing, and that's the glory of it. I mean, Robin Leonard goes into Chicago, and he is with a team that is subpar, but he's got the third best save percentage in the league. Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah, he's a good guy.
That he can perform that well, and Pasternak and Marchand are 1-2 in the league, and you can probably win or lose a dinner on this, Jay.
Already lost one.
McDavid is okay. This goes back for anybody that has listened to the podcast longer than a couple of years. I assured the good doctor that he was going to be safe to bet against McDavid getting 100 points because the team that he was on was not strong enough to support him in that regard, and of course I was wrong. and so there had to be a payoff on that, and of course I was absolved because I was a long ways off, and he doesn't have my credit card number.
This is true.
So there we are.
What Connor McDavid is doing is pretty incredible. I mean, this guy just gets better.
Yes,
and better.
it is.
Yeah, and you talked like
it is.
Anytime I talk to friends in the league, they always say the one guy that you think about when you're suiting up and you're going up against McDavid, he's the one guy that is automatically in your head. Well, it should be.
Yeah, well, it's
a remarkable collection of skills.
We brought up, in fact, Jason and I were at the NHL Awards, and we brought it up to him that I bet against him, and he was actually pretty cool about it. He goes, "Serves you right," kind of thing. Right. So
he did clench a fist.
He did.
Think
he's a lot bigger than I am, that's for sure. But
he's got some handshake too on him. Unbelievable.
Yeah,
right?
he's a very cool
man,
guy.
Child.
Yeah,
Something.
giant guy.
He's just a beast. Yeah.
And he so we do have Mr. Solani coming in tomorrow night, Doc, for a special episode, and
Wonderful.
we're gonna see if we can make good on that bet finally and go down to his steakhouse and have the Dr. Hockey dinner. So you're definitely invited if you're anywhere near Southern California.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, as you know, I'll be in the opposite side of the country tomorrow night, but I'll have a smile on my face because I'll be seeing a very good hockey game. But what a wonderful guy. You'll be in terrific company, as you well know, and you've probably been in that company a number of times, but he's in a 500 weight tie for first for nice guy. We're just loaded with them in the sport, and that's what makes it good. I don't want to talk too long because you told me you had some questions that were sent in by listeners, and I don't want to ignore that.
Doc, I want to mention one thing, though. I was watching on Fox Sports Detroit the broadcast of the Jamie Daniels Foundation, the roast of Mickey Redmond that you hosted. And it was for a wonderful cause. Jamie Daniels, as you know, was Ken Daniels' son, who unfortunately died of a drug overdose, and they have a whole foundation for him. But you did a wonderful job hosting that, and I was really couldn't turn the channel when you were on, and all the different guests were there talking about stories. And what was it like to host that room with like Scotty Bowman and Babcock and those guys? What was it like?
It was fun to have a convention of so many wonderful people, and that just tells you about the nature of our sport. And whenever there's a cause like that, no one even hems or haws about coming in. The hardest thing to do is to find a time when everybody could come, and Ken agonized over that for almost a whole summer, and then had the date fixed for over a year. He had talked to me about it in July of the previous year, which would have been 2018, for September of 2019. So he plotted it out pretty carefully, including looking at the college football schedules and the training camps and everything else to try to find a weekend that would work to get all of those hockey people together, and he did. And to sit in the room, and I was all ears more than contributing, because when those people are there, they all have something to say. And we did have some delays in getting everyone there. But the good thing about that is once they all got there, all they wanted to do was talk to one another before we marched out on stage. And so that was the fun part.
Nice. It was a great thing to watch, and great cause as well. So.
Well, Doc, here are a couple of here's a couple of questions that have come to us from our fans. One of our listeners at Dope Smith asked, Doc, what's your favorite Stanley Cup playoff moment you called?
That's an easy one for you, Doc.
There's so many, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I don't know. It's been fun to be around so many of those moments. I don't really know. The selfish one, of course, would have been the first time that the team that I followed all year won. And now, ever since 1995, the guys that broadcast the team's games during the year, the rule changed where in the last 2 rounds, and now it's been in the last 3, they're not allowed to go to the final unless they happen to be the network broadcaster, and that's what happened to me that year with New Jersey in 1995. So I got to call the Game 4 against Detroit. Had it been a clinch in a different game, because we were sharing then, Fox was with ESPN, so had it gone to a Game 5, I wouldn't have been doing that game, and then I think 6 and 7 would have swung back to us. But it just worked out that I did, and it was the only time that I got to broadcast a game that the Devils wound up winning the championship on. So I guess that stands out for that reason. But for a lot of other reasons, there are memories that ring true. A lot of times it's in the celebration.
sure.
Like Sidney Crosby handing the cup first to Trevor Daley, whose mother was dying of cancer and who wasn't able to play because of a broken ankle. And he's out there in skates, in his uniform. And if you look at the video again, you realize that he accepts the trophy and he turns with it, and it's a little unsteady, but you realize that he gets the cup first, and it's pretty impressive that he handled it as well as he did. But it was extremely important, and so I guess those are things that stay in your mind. Jim Rutherford was the general manager of the Carolina Hurricanes, and he had emergency. He had had emergency surgery during the playoffs, and he was not supposed to lift anything heavier than 2 pounds for 6 weeks. And the cup is 35. Well, now it's 37.5 because they added some bolts and some shims in between the rings this past year. So now it's gone up 2.5 more pounds, but back then it was 35. And he didn't seem to have a problem with it, but you sort of grimaced because I knew what he'd gone through. I've had kidney stone surgery myself, And it's kind of painful, and that was exactly what he went through during, I think, the third round of the playoffs, and here it is, the fourth. But those are some of the things that you remember from the Stanley Cup final. But I guess the one that would stand out is the one that actually involved a team that I had followed all year. And even though your job as a network broadcaster is to be impartial, you kind of feel for the guys that you've been around, because you realize the sacrifices they've made off and on during their careers that have come up short, and now they're going to get that reward. The one other thing that I remember from that game was it's the only time I recall that a player actually missed a shift because he was crying. Mike Peluso, who was the left winger on the crash line for the Devils with Bobby Holik and Randy McKay, with about 5 or 6 minutes to go, and there's no shame in this. He was just overcome by emotions because the Devils were ahead 5-2, and he realized, I'm going to win the Stanley Cup, and I'm on a team that's going to win. And there was a close-up that our Fox cameras got of him at the bench, and John Davidson took note of the fact that he actually did miss a shift. And then in the handshake line, he was still trying to hide his face and his shoulder as he was shaking hands with everybody. And it was, another one of those memories that you have when you've seen a lot of Stanley Cup playoffs, that here was an emotional high for someone, and it was just the way that the emotions gave rise.
See, I was the opposite. Since they beat my Red Wings, I was crying because I was devastated. So, and
yeah, I remember Slava Fetisov. Yeah, I remember Slava Fetisov on the ice actually getting congratulated by some of the Red Wings or some of the Devils because he had just left the team, and many of them knew him. And he hung around a little longer after the handshake line because some of the guys wanted to console him a little longer than they would have the rest of the team because they knew him. And then, of course, he would eventually get championships of his own later on in Detroit. But that's another photographic thing that lodged in my mind from that day in New Jersey.
Doc, I have a question. I promise this is my last Islander reference, but this is for both of us because
we're here for questions. Don't apologize.
Lou Lamoriello.
As long as there's not a wager for dinner, I'm more than happy to answer them.
So obviously, I'm sure you know Lou Lamoriello, right?
Yes.
What is it that makes him? How is it? Granted, coaching and Barry Trotz, but how can a guy? And look, I was always, very good friends with Garth Snow, and I think is sort of underrated. He did some good work under there with a lot of limited supplies, let's call it. But how does Lou Lamoriello and Barry Trotz, how do you turn a franchise around like that in 1 year? I mean, there wasn't even a rebuilding phase. They took over, and they finished with 103 points, and they tied the Capitals, and they lost the tiebreaker for the Metropolitan Division. How can a coach and or GM be so powerful and effective in just a year?
I think it's a combination of not only the roster that they agree on, but also the fact that they see the philosophy the same way, and it's a similar way that Jacques Lemaire saw it with Lou and carried that on to Minnesota. And the only time the Wild were successful was when they were defense first and they got to the conference final against Anaheim. But I think that's what it is. And Barry was so in Nashville, when Nashville was able to succeed, and I realize there weren't any playoffs that were that way, but when they would beat you, they would beat you with goaltending and defense. And I'll never forget a conversation that Barry told me about that he had before Washington's championship year in the summer with Alexander Ovechkin. I'll get back to it in just a second. But I think that Lou found the guy that could follow through on his philosophy of defense first hockey, having goaltending that was good. And I think the notion of bringing in Varlamov made a big difference too, because Greiss was underestimated, I think, how good he was. Leonard had a wonderful year and is proving that he was a very capable goaltender, and he's doing that this year in Chicago too. But that you can, if you play a system that is really solid in front of your goaltender, everybody benefits from it. They made very few changes in that team, very quiet over the summer, And yet look at where they are now. And all it takes is some time. It may not happen overnight, but you can really build a powerhouse with team cohesiveness. And then when everyone goes along, it's amazing how hard a team you are to beat. And you may not have the biggest star on your roster. And in New Jersey, yeah, there were some familiar faces, the goaltender and the captain and Scott Stevens and all of that. But you may not have the biggest stars in the league on your roster, but you have a team that can be very dangerous, especially at playoff time, by the way that you play during the season. And I think that's pretty much the epitome of what Lou and Barry Trotz have done.
I mean, they changed everything over there. They changed everything over there, and I mean everything for the better.
Yeah, compared to what it was 2 years ago.
I mean, do you believe these guys? I'm not allowed on the bench anymore. This is ridiculous. These damn hockey purists.
No, that much is true. There are rules for how things are done, and I was well aware of that before I rejoined them. I had 3 years in 80-83 when Max McNabb was there, and we were allowed on the charter, etc. But I knew when I came back in 1993. And was there until 2011. When I rejoined, I knew that there were some rules, and that traveling on commercial airliners was going to be one of them. But that going in, and I grew up in a family of my father was a high school principal, and my mom was a guidance counselor, and I knew that when rules were established, as long as you understood those, you could operate within that framework and everything got along fine. And that was the case with the way things were with the Devils. And I'm sure that's the way it is with the Islanders, and that's the reason that things function so well. And Barry Trotz, just to tell you the story in brief, before Game 5 in Vegas, I asked Barry to retell a story that he had told me during the middle of the year because I wanted to have it word for word right in case they won that night. And it was a story that he had told me about a conversation that he had had with Alex Ovechkin after his wedding that summer in Moscow. Barry had been invited over to the wedding. He attended. He didn't go to the reception. He said they don't need a hockey coach hanging around his players at a wedding reception.
It's very true.
But I had dinner with Alex a couple of days later before he went on his honeymoon, and I simply explained to him that there's a lot of hardship back in Washington. There are going to be a lot of changes. People have already moved on. It's going to be a hard year. And there are people in Washington that think it's your fault. And so you're going to have to understand that, and you are going to have to train like you never trained before and reinvent yourself. You're not going to be able to take nights off, and you're going to have to be one of the first guys on the ice. But you can do it. You have people around the world, young people, who wear a red uniform, number 8, and they go out and they play out in the winter times, and they because of you, that's going to be your legacy. It's probably not going to be the individual trophies or maybe even a Stanley Cup that you win. Your legacy will be the kind of person you are and the way that you play this sport. But the way that you play the sport has to change this year, because we're not going to be as solid a team as we have been in the past. So it's up to you. And then he flew back to the States, and Alex went on his honeymoon. So what did he do? He came into camp, and the first 2 games of the regular season, he was the first guy in 102 years to score 7 goals in the first 2 games. He had hat tricks in both games. He was a different player all year. And that wasn't necessarily because the coach told him he had to be. It was because he chose to be. And he had a marvelous year. And I think, in my opinion, if anybody turned himself around in terms of the public perception of himself, it was Ovechkin. There were people actually liking and cheering for him that might not have done that before. Not in Washington. He's loved there, and he always was. But I think in other cities. There were people that were cheering for him and his team. It was hard to not cheer for Vegas, given everything that went on and given the kind of story that they had too. But I think from a network perception, it was going to be heads we win, tails we win, because there was going to be a good story coming out of it either way. And it was kind of a shame that either team had to lose, but it was a great story because of Holtby's save in the second game and how that seemed to turn things around for the Capitals. And then Alex was the MVP and the award and all of that went along with it. And then they sort of showed Washington and the Nationals how you do it when you win a championship.
Oh, yeah.
And
that's for sure.
So I think that was another thing that came with it. But isn't it interesting that you brought up Barry Trotz, and that was one of the heart-to-heart talks that he had with one of his most important players, and the end result was the most important player could have shrugged it off, but he didn't. And then he had the most satisfying year of his career. And I also looked again recently at the video of him handing the cup to his coach in the celebration that happened in Vegas after it was all done. It was pretty special.
And do you think he has any shot at catching the great one when it's all said and done?
It's hard to know because I remember the quote that I saw this fall from Nicholas Backstrom, I believe it was, that the Russian machine seems to never wear out. And if that happens, if we keep getting 50-goal seasons from him, then I know math as well as almost anybody else, though I'm not very good at computing it quickly. He'll get there eventually, but it's so hard to know. It was such a wonderful record that Wayne fashioned. It's hard to know. You hesitate to speculate, but Alexander Ovechkin has rarely ever missed a game, and rarely ever for any kind of injury. The man is 236 pounds. On opening night in St. Louis, and you know how big the Blues are, there was only one player that came close to him in weight, and that was Colton Parayko at 230. He was bigger than anybody on the ice for either team. And so he just doesn't seem to get hurt.
He doesn't seem to be slowing down either. I mean, he's got 10 already this year.
He wheels it pretty well. He gets that big engine going, and he doesn't slow down a lot. He doesn't do as much unnecessary hitting as he did in his early years. He was always one of the top hitters in the league, and he's still up there. But he doesn't go out of his way to do as much unnecessary hitting as he used to. But no, he's as his coach told him that day too, 2 days after his wedding, you're going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, so you don't need to worry about that. That's going to be a part of your legacy too. But just don't worry about that. Just be the best player you can be, because people are going to always consider you to be one of the best ever. So that shouldn't be a worry at this point. Just be ready to play.
Well, Doc, we have another question for you about a team that has showed a lot of promise and hasn't really come around to the level of making it happen the way that I think their fans and probably the rest of the league would expect. What's going to happen?
Let me guess, Philadelphia?
Well, that would be
them
one
too.
of them. But we're going to skip them too. That's the East Coast. I guess that's really the East Coast version of this team, in my eyes, is the San Jose Sharks. This is a team that's really curated a great bunch of players, but they haven't been able to put it together. They were close until the Pittsburgh Penguins did some damage to them in that Cup final, but we haven't seen them even coming close since then. What do you think is going to happen for that franchise? It's really kind of a hodgepodge.
I don't know. And the thing about the Sharks too is they've been the most consistent playoff team of all the teams in the league. I mean, they're always in the playoffs in terms of teams that get there. But I know the goaltending gets beat up, and you need at least one of your goaltenders to be .900 in save percentage, and here we are at 887 and 878 as we're talking in early November, and it's easy to hang everything on the goaltending, but it hasn't been good. and then the productivity of even the best of the players hasn't even been at a point of game pace. I wish it were better, because the fans out there sure deserve it. They've had a consistently good squad for so long that just can't get over the hump, and I don't know what the solution is.
I feel like every year,
I could tell you.
I feel like every year they're like one of the teams that they're always on a list. You know, somebody's picks the San Jose Sharks, much the way they did the Blues for many years.
Yeah.
And the Blues, every year, the Blues are supposed to be so great. And then last year, I mean, look, on January 1st or 2nd, they were last in the league last year, right?
Yeah. They were down there.
There's still a lot of hockey left. So I'm not ready to go giving that cup to anybody yet, until that stretch happens.
No, and we learned last year that you don't eliminate anybody.
Right.
Even 2 days after the Winter Classic, you don't eliminate anybody, because we learned with St. Louis that didn't happen. But there aren't going to be St. Louis's every year, and if you're buried like Ottawa and St. Louis were last year, there's a greater chance you're going to be like Ottawa was than St. Louis in being able to come back and turn something on as big as what they did last year. But I wish I could answer the question. All I can do is sympathize. I mean, Joe Pavelski's loss was something, but you can't keep them all. I mean, the nature of a salary cap is that. We do remember a time, don't we, before 14 years ago, when if you had the cash, you could keep anybody. And Detroit Red Wing fans remember when they built an all-star team every year at the trade deadline.
Oh, the good old days.
Bring in Robitaille and bring in Hull and bring in Hasek, and it was amazing the kind of teams that could be assembled. But that day has passed.
Well, I think it's great because it keeps the smaller market teams in the conversation. The Winnipeg Jets,
of course,
the Islanders. I think it's ultimately better for the league. And listen, I'm also a Yankee fan, so I know about buying championships. But it's true, the Red Wings did. They put. But I have to ask you one last question, I promise, and then we'll go to the fans. But what are your thoughts on Carolina Hurricanes, the celebration, and sort of even with the Blues, with the Play Gloria, and sort of the, I don't know, sort of like the between whistle
kitschy celebrations?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't even know that's you call that kitschy. I mean, they're slam dunking a basketball on the Carolina Hurricanes.
That's kitschy.
What do you think about the over the top? I mean, it goes beyond kitschy. So, what do you think? I mean, we know what Don Cherry had to say about it, but for the hockey purists, do you have a problem with it? What are your thoughts?
It's fun for people that are paying the price of admission to watch the game, and so for that reason, I don't have a problem with it. There is an old expression that I've last heard on Ken Burns' recent series on country music. One of the performers said, "You can't put your foot in the same river twice, because that river's always turning." And I think if you wind up wanting, we all have great memories of what the game once was, and if we always get up every day wanting it to be what it once was, we're going to be frustrated because it's not, and we're always going to be grumpy. And I don't want to be that way. Despite the records of the two teams, I'm excited about seeing Dylan Larkin tomorrow night.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm excited about seeing some of the young New York Rangers. And maybe, even though those teams aren't two of the best in the league, they might play a real exciting game, strangely enough, people work hard to prepare notes for us. 14 of the last 15 games between the Rangers and Red Wings have been decided by one goal.
Wow.
So the law of
fun.
averages says we're going to have an overtime game or a one-goal game tomorrow, or it'll be really rare between these two teams. So it might be a real exciting game, even though these are not two of the headline teams in the league the way it's evolved in the first 5 weeks of the season. And so to get back to your question, hey, would I be the guy that would be captain of the Hurricanes thinking up all of these events and leading my team to it? No, because I've been doing games for 47 years, and I love the sport, but I love a lot of its history and the fact that teams don't show up, other teams like that. And by that time, by the way, the opponent is gone anyway, so they're not seeing it. But if it's entertaining the Carolina fans that have paid the price of admission, it's not hurting anything, so fine. I did water polo at 2 Olympics, 2004 and 2012 in Athens and London. I was kind of disappointed the Hurricanes never tried water polo. Can you imagine?
That would have been a good one.
What it would look like? They would be doing bicycling, and they would be faking with the ball in their hand, and the goal net would be 2 of them pushed together so they could be a lot bigger. I don't know. It would be sort of bizarre, wouldn't it? Now, anyway, so
it
that
seemed to
have
it brought them together.
It really
though.
doesn't bother me.
It brought them together as a team.
God bless the Blues for honoring Layla Anderson,
right?
And so that's fine too. I think you can frustrate yourself a lot if you want everything to be the way it was. Do I get a big smile on my face when I see Bill Barber in Philadelphia and when I see Rod Gilbert in New York? Yeah, I sure do, because they were wonderful players that were great contributors to the sport and the history of the sport. But I get excited by seeing players the ilk of David Pasternak too, because they have skills as well. And so I don't get into debates about which era was best, because then somebody loses. And all of them have been great contributors to our sport, and it's a wonderful sport still, and it's been a great sport before.
Well, I think you see the young talent that's coming into the league now, and it's very exciting. I mean, I just love. I mean, Artemi Panarin's been playing for a while, but I think you're going to get a lot of production out of him with the Rangers, and then he's got a.
They better for that amount of money.
They will, and yeah, I agree. And then they have these, the folks that have been there for a while, and then of course with Capo there, I think the Rangers have a bright future. And even though these teams are like you said, they're not the headlining teams. I think on a Wednesday night rivalry, you're gonna get a lot of people tuning in to watch this one. There's a ton of Red Wings fans everywhere you go, and there are Ranger fans everywhere you go, and they're all gonna want to watch this game tomorrow night for sure.
Their original 6 teams.
You only need to. Yeah, I'm sure in Los Angeles and Anaheim, whenever those teams come in, you see lots of jerseys in the stands. And Barry Trotz used to tell me when he was coaching Nashville, he said, there is an auto plant here, and a lot of people move down from Detroit to work in the auto plant. And whenever the Red Wings come in, it's awful here, because it's about half our crowd. And that was in the early years of the Nashville franchise, when they weren't selling out all the time. So yeah, I understand that, and it's part of what makes the sport fun, is that teams travel fans and they do that. It's not just the Charlestown Chiefs and the fans in the other bus driving by and waving at the players.
The boosters.
It happens at every level.
Oh yeah, I mean when I was in Pittsburgh in the '90s watching the Penguins, we played Detroit, and it was packed house with Red Wings fans. It was.
Well, it's not a terrible drive, right? What's it? 4 hours, 3.5 hours?
I don't think it's too far, and they would
right.
fill that igloo back in the day, and it was like. It's disconcerting.
Listen, Islander Ranger games are half Ranger fans.
Oh,
yeah, it just comes with the territory.
Oh, of course. Yeah, that one's always a tough rivalry.
No, but I agree. I mean, no matter what, if you're a hockey fan, the Red Wings and Rangers, the jerseys alone moving around on the ice are enough to get my attention.
So did you study up for the game, Doc, for tomorrow night? What are the standout stats on these two teams that are a bit struggling, but are there any bright spots that we could warm Jason Berkeley's heart with on the Red Wings?
Well, what has happened is I've given you a few of them that I've gotten. I need to download after I hang up here some more that have come to me from NBC. And in the morning, I will get the ones from Detroit. So I haven't exactly spent everything with you, but there's more work for me to do yet tonight after I hang up.
Well, your routine for preparation is laudable. Yeah. It's like studying for a calculus final in college. I can't get over how much work you do for these games. It's immense.
Oh, it's fun though. It really is the fun part, and then delivering it or finding a place for it without trying to jam it in is another part of the fun part. And a lot of times I discovered in just a rare venture into baseball for a couple of times that I was able to get almost everything I wanted to get in. But with hockey, it's usually about 10%. And that's okay, because there's always another time, and you are working with two people that have a lot to contribute, and when play stops, they usually have replays or things to add. And there's a reason they're there. Eddie and Brian have both played the game, one as a scorer and the other as a stopper. And so they have a perspective to give, which is far more important. But if I've got 5 seconds or so to do something of a background nature about a player, then that's fine. I've got a chance to do that. But a lot of the fun part for me is looking up things about these guys and learning more about them, other than the fact that, say, Jacob Trouba leads the Rangers in shots, average time on ice, hits, and blocks. Now, usually, one player does not lead his team in all 4 of those categories, but in the case of Trouba, he does, going into tomorrow night's game. So those are probably items that I won't get in, so I share them with you and your listeners now.
Well, do you still make the poster board sort of fact sheet and all of your stats so that you can easily access it, or have you gone digital?
Yeah, no. Oh no. Here's why I'm so much of an analog freak. I write those out, and if we were doing this on Skype or something, why, you'd see my book open with a 3-ring binder, and the Red Wings are in red on the left in numerical order, except the goaltenders are first, and then the Rangers would be in blue on the right-hand side. And then if I were to lift up that center section that has the Red Wing lineup on it, underneath that would be little biographies with 3 dots in between on most of the players. And they would just be little nuggets about each player that could be thrown in 5 seconds before a face-off, or as a punctuation to an icing or something, if there was time to do it. And when I get chances, and we do get time to talk to players, the home team skates at 10:30, the visitors at 11:30 in the morning. And then as rights holders, we get time with both coaches. And so we'll get a chance to talk to the coaches either in the morning or before the game at night, depending on their schedule and when they're available to us. So we do get time to talk to maybe 2-3 players, and then each of the 2 head coaches the day of the game. So at that time, if I have any questions about some of the things I have written down, usually I can search out the player in question and in a brief time, get an answer to that. So those are things that help me. I've got like 9 Rangers that I wanted to search out. Well, I won't get them all, but I have them again 2 weeks from tomorrow against Washington. So I've got another shot at just doing that. And the chances are that these things I may not use for a year, but you always have them. And that part of their life, their biographical thing, doesn't change. So those are helpful things to have. I was told that the great broadcaster Vin Scully, whom I've talked to on the phone but I've never met face-to-face before, had a card file that he used when a batter would come to the plate. He would just refer to the card file. And those wonderful stories that he used to tell between pitches, he had continually just made an analog card on each player, and so he might have several cards on a player, and he would be able to do just remarkable things, but it was all analog. It was not off any kind of electronic thing at all. And I always admired his a number of things, but he was asked at the end of the last century what the most remarkable thing was, the most helpful thing for sports broadcasting in the 20th century was. And you probably heard the answer because being where you are. He said it was the yellow highlighter. And I thought, what a great answer, because all of us analog guys like writing on things, but when you write with a yellow highlighter, you can still read it. And I thought that's the best answer I could ever think of.
That's funny.
That is classic. And now you can digitally highlight everything, so it's a whole different animal.
Yeah, of course.
That's my kids do.
Now you do it the same way.
Totally.
Exactly.
Well, listen, we really appreciate you coming on again, Doc. This is amazing. We love talking to you, and we love tuning in for Rivalry and all the other games you cover. It's the Stanley Cup last year was awesome, and we really appreciate you taking time with our listeners. They love having you, and good luck tomorrow night with the Rangers and the Red Wings. Hopefully Jason won't have to cry again, but he's got lots of boxes.
I've been crying a lot lately, actually. So it's
he's got. But I know that Kevin's Islanders are in for a big year. So
10-0.
10-0. They
They're
just
up,
won again.
They're up 4-1.
Right now?
3 minutes left. Yeah.
I think
Have they already won tonight? I wouldn't be surprised. I know they were ahead when
they're
we
up.
started.
They're up 4-1 right now with 3 minutes to go. So
that's
anything
a good
could happen.
sign.
But yeah. But, so it's 10 in a row. Second
And the
longest
No Lead
ever.
is safe National Hockey League. I think they're safe.
That's true.
Yeah,
right.
very good. No, it's wonderful to talk with you, and thank the people for listening. And I just I wish you all a wonderful upcoming holiday season, because there are so many holidays coming up before we'll visit again.
Yeah.
So thank you again for your interest in this great sport.
Thanks a lot,
And
Doc.
take care of yourselves.
Thanks, Doc.
You bet.
Okay.
We'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Okay.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
night. Bye now.
A lot of doctors.
Yeah, that's good. Well, he's a legit PhD. He's the only one in the sport, I think, calling the games.
Yeah.
With an actual graduate degree.
But I mean, just his love for the game. I mean, you can just it's just oozing. He's.
I would love to the one time to hear him do announcing of something very mundane during the day.
Right.
Brushing your teeth, or something like just making breakfast.
Oh,
that would be
good.
great.
Well, he adds so much to the game when you're watching that it's really, I think it's just really fun to have him calling the game, even when I'm watching, one of my teams that I like to watch or whatever, but he just really adds so much to it.
Well, he mentioned Vin Scully, and there are certain voices that are synonymous with just a comfortable feeling about the sport. Keith Jackson with college football, when he'd say Alabama, that type of thing. Certain things are Howard Cosell doing games back in the 70s. Doc, for in Detroit baseball, it was Ernie Harwell when I was growing up listening on the radio. So certain voices, as for certain teams you listen to, and for you as well, those voices are synonymous with the sport, and his is synonymous with hockey.
And it's funny too when you listen to your team all year long, and you get used to your color guys,
your local
right?
guys,
right. Get used to your local guys. But when Doc Emrick calls an overtime win in the playoffs for your team, it just feels different, and that's no knock on anybody else, but there's only one Doc Emrick.
Right.
When he I remember the big Tavares goal when they beat the Panthers. Just to have Doc Emrick call like that goal, it's different. It just elevates to another level. And again, that's no knock on anybody else. He's just the best in the business.
That's why he's a Hall of Famer.
Yep.
I mean, that's on Hall of Fame week here at the Dr. Hockey Podcast. We gotta definitely mention that.
He also too, like, just the way it's almost like he feels a duty as an ambassador to the game.
Totally.
To reach out, and like he knows that this is an important platform of real hockey fans, and it's like almost his duty to come on and spend his time, and
he does.
He's so present, and we got all of him there.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
No, he's
it's
great.
like, I mean, we're sitting here looking at we're checking scores. Doc Emrick was in that interview the whole time. I was watching the shootout highlight.
Yeah, no,
for
he's
the Islander game. He's the man.
He's an amazing.
How do you
guy.
get him? How do you know him?
So the way that I know him is he knows Ernie Manders, who is one of my mentors at the University of Pittsburgh, because Manders was the chair of plastic surgery at Hershey, Penn State. And when Ernie came to Pittsburgh, Doc would float into town for games and stuff. He was still moving around with the Devils at the time. And Ernie said, "Oh, you should talk to my friend on your podcast." I said, "Who's that?" He goes, "Doc Emrick." I was like, I would love to talk to your friend.
That would be very nice if you could set that up. That would be great.
So Ernie is still, he's retired, but he's retired and practicing plastic surgery still at the University of Pittsburgh. Brilliant guy, has loads of patents, essentially invented the tissue expander for breast reconstruction, and he's just a brilliant person. And I could see he and Doc being like super tight, like go out to dinner and like change the world kind of friends. They were that brilliant of people. And
because Doc's a busy guy, you know, and
totally
for him
busy.
to take the time and do a real interview, that's the real deal right there.
Hey,
the night before a game.
Big game.
He's always good about it. He'll want to probably come in and chat with us again around playoffs, because that's then he always has a lot to say about how he thinks things are going to go. So he's like I said, it's great for our listeners and it's great for us. I always like talking to him, and I feel very, very blessed that he's able to take that time and talk to us. I mean, he's a hockey legend, a living legend.
It's a good connection.
And,
it's a good connection.
You know, tomorrow, you know, we'll have Teemu on, and you know, another guy who's just left an imprint on the sport of hockey, and I want to hear what he's got to say. So that's going to be excellent.
I think that'll be our first in studio Hall of Famer.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's a big deal.
Yeah, exciting.
No, I mean, Teemu's got his book's great. It's called My Life. I saw him signing, autographing copies of the book at the Ducks loss the other night, overtime loss to Chicago. It was also Ryan Getzlaff's 1,000th game.
Unbelievable.
You talk about a beast.
It kind of flies by too.
Zdeno Chara's 1,500th game tonight.
Yeah,
tonight.
Yeah.
He started with the Islanders.
Yeah, unbelievable. Another.
Had Lou
Good
Lamoriello
thing
been
we
there
got rid
then.
of him. Good thing we got rid of him. He really amounted to not.
That was
much.
a good move.
Good
I mean,
move.
there's a lot of them. There's a lot of players from a lot of teams that you go like, what were we thinking? But you know, Chara.
I mean, didn't Pavel Datsyuk go in like the 7th round or something crazy?
Well, that's how most of those players did at the time.
Yeah.
You know, they weren't even supposed to scout him at the time.
Yeah,
But how could you? I mean,
Yeah.
how did everybody miss that one? I don't know. That's
I
a
think
peculiar.
Zetterberg was a 3rd or 4th rounder.
Right.
I mean, Lidstrom wasn't a top, first round pick.
Well, that goes to show. I mean, that's the Red Wings, scouting and management.
Well, I mean, you look at Pekka Rinne was a last round. I don't remember if it was 8th or 9th or whatever, but he was like a last round, goalie pickup, and the guy's, he's just amazing.
Yeah,
he's amazing.
He's amazing.
Well, anyway, great chat, everybody. Really appreciate the fans sending in the questions, and
you watched Firefox since last time?
I did not get to. It's in my queue.
I knew it was coming.
It's in my queue.
It was coming up. But we are.
It's been a long day. Firefox. Oh yeah.
Yeah. No, we're gonna
maybe
skip
tonight.
That one.
Maybe tonight.
I do think it's gonna be fun to have Josh Reel in though on the 19th.
Yeah.
He's gonna come in the studio because they are making an Oscar bid. So I'm gonna push everybody I know who's got any connection to anybody in the Academy like that. For the documentary, I'd love to see that. I'd love to see that movie win, because not just as a hockey movie.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's your pitch. It's a Cold War.
It's a Cold War movie
with hockey as a backdrop.
Don't
say hockey.
It's not.
Say Cold War.
It is a Cold War movie, but it's also a movie about.
It's a human interest story. I mean, it does. It's got it all. Listen, movies. It's just a matter of getting the right look. It is about the campaign.
I hope so.
So, but who knows? Timing is the essence.
We'll ask Josh when he's here. So you guys stay tuned on the Dr. Hockey podcast. These are going up on YouTube if you want to watch them on the Dr. Hockey channel, and. We're trying to do more of the video, just because I know a lot of people like to watch the guests, and especially we're going to have camera crew here for Teemu tomorrow, so we can get some, more than what we have. We're going to get a guy who's.
Do I have to wear makeup? Is that necessary?
Certain things
should go through touch-ups.
You got
should go through touch-ups.
Yeah, I don't know. Huh. I could do some
We have that
surgery
here
tomorrow,
at
actually.
Action Park Studios.
You know what? Here's what I predict.
The OR is open, and I'm here to help.
Since Kevin is the actor here, I could see him saying, "Yeah, I got makeup for you."
Oh, we do.
I'm going to be up here looking like a French whore with rouge and eyeliner. And
make you look silly.
Yeah,
make you look silly
anyway.
for
How do I
Teemu.
look?
You look like that anyway. You don't have to.
Like a French whore? Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, anyway, we'll catch up tomorrow or the next time for you guys listening on the Dr. Hockey Podcast. This is the Dr. Hockey Podcast signing off with your prescription for the NHL.